Research is one of the most important systems in RimWorld. It shapes how your colony grows and dictates the pace at which your story unfolds. Whether you are planning to leave the Rim or turn this planet into a permanent home. And yet, when it comes to research, most players are looking for the right order. The only problem is, there isn't one. In RimWorld, research progression only makes sense when it's shaped by your biome, your goals, and the kind of colony you are trying to build. Later on, we will talk about research speed and some common misconceptions surrounding it. But first, we need to understand how to approach this process with intention and flexibility in mind. To keep the focus clear, this video looks at vanilla RimWorld, because before any expansion reshapes progression, the core decisions are already there. In practice, research in RimWorld starts once you build a research bench, even though certain technologies can also be acquired through schematics. In vanilla, your colony can start from one of two technological baselines. Most scenarios, like Crash Landed, Naked Brutality, and Rich Explorer, begin at the industrial level, while Lost Tribe represents a Neolithic start. Technological level in RimWorld doesn't restrict what you can research. Instead, it slows down progression beyond your starting tech level, and this baseline cannot be changed during a playthrough. You don't promote a colony from Neolithic to industrial. You simply accept an increasing time cost when researching more advanced technologies. This is intentional. RimWorld doesn't block progression, it makes you pay for it with time. This alone should already influence how you think about research. Skipping large parts of the research tree to rush advanced projects can stall your colony's development. At the same time, the game already provides complete systems even at the Neolithic level. You have beer brewing and cocoa production to manage mood, campfires and passive coolers for basic temperature control, complex clothing and smithing to keep your colonists protected, and so on and so on. And one particularly interesting option available from the very beginning, Devil Strand. Devil Strand is often undervalued, but in the hands of a capable crafter, it can provide excellent protection through parkas, dusters, shirts and pants. However, choosing this research requires context. Devil Strand grows extremely slowly, and without sun lamps or artificial heating, successfully growing it at a Neolithic level depends entirely on your biome and the length of growing season. In warm, stable climates, it's a powerful early investment. In colder environments, it can easily become a wasted one. The research itself doesn't change, the circumstances do. The same logic applies when choosing between weapons and armor. Early on, armor and clothing tend to matter more than weapons. Weapons are easily acquired from raiders or quests, and bio-coded weapons are quite rare. Clothes, on the other hand, get tainted on dead colonists, and you won't always be able to strip them from enemies before they die. Not everyone is gonna be happy about wearing this stuff, you know. Serious injuries and lost limbs can happen early, while meaningful prosthetics sit much deeper in the research tree. Apparel defines survivability long before that point, so it is important to keep that in mind. Let's leave tribal starts for a moment and look at the most common case, industrial tech level colonies. One of the earliest and most persistent limitations here is component availability. Not because components are rare, but because producing them yourself takes a long time to unlock and even longer to scale. Fabrication sits deep in the research tree, and even once it's unlocked, producing components in meaningful quantities requires a significant investment of labor and infrastructure. That is why fabrication is often treated as a priority research, sometimes even as a rush. But the research tree quietly offers a different kind of solution much earlier. Long-range mineral scanning doesn't speed up production, it bypasses it. Unlike ground-penetrating scanners, long-range scanners allow you to choose exactly what you are looking for, and one of those options is compacted machinery. This shifts the problem entirely. Instead of waiting for components to be manufactured, you trade time at the research bench for logistics, manpower, and risk. Mining expeditions require skilled miners, pack animals, and the willingness to send colonists away from home. But when they do work, they can supply large amounts of components in a very short time. Neither approach is strictly better. They solve the same problem in completely different ways. And this is the pattern worth paying attention to. Research in RimWorld doesn't just unlock production. Sometimes it unlocks alternatives. Another common early game limitation is dependency on wood. Many guides recommend researching batteries as a first priority, and that's not a bad idea in itself. But this advice often carries an unspoken assumption that electricity only becomes viable once batteries are there, and that simply isn't true. This is a good example of how research advice can unintentionally slow progression down, not mechanically but mentally. There is nothing in RimWorld that forces you to rely on fueled stoves, torches, or other tribal-style solutions until batteries are researched. Refrigeration is not locked behind them either. In industrial tech-level starts, electricity is already available from day one. Wood-fire generators, chem fuel generators, and wind turbines are all part of your starting toolkit. Yes, this means dealing with temporary power shortages, but those are constraints, not blockers. If you are willing to accept some instability early on, you can significantly reduce your dependence on wood long before batteries enter the picture. Batteries will become important rather sooner than later, but they don't have to define your early priorities or slow you down in the meantime. Research speed in RimWorld is not a fixed value, it is something we can influence. We have already talked about technological level, but that's only one part of the equation. Once a research bench is placed indoors, the game treats that space as a lab. And from that point on, the environment begins to matter. The most basic requirement is simply being indoors. Research benches placed outside suffer a heavy penalty, making this one of the easiest ways to lose progress without even realizing it. A lab doesn't need to be impressive, it just simply needs a roof. Temperature belongs to the same category. Researching in extreme cold or excessive heat will slow progress down as well, regardless of how optimized everything else is. Cleanliness is the next factor. The cleaner the laboratory, the faster research progresses. This is why sterile tiles become relevant, not because they're always optimal, but because at certain stages research itself becomes a priority worth supporting. From there, the game allows you to commit even further. Bookcases stocked with books and the multi-analyzer provide additional bonuses. One side note on the lab: don't go crazy with amount of bookcases in vanilla. When I tried to over-optimize a lab, I found out that research speed capped out at 144%, which is done by having sterile lab with multi-analyzer and 15 packed bookcases. Building any additional bookcases beyond that is a waste of materials, so be warned. Another great way to increase research speed is to place multiple research benches. They will all share the bonuses from multi-analyzer and bookcases. And finally, everything funnels back to the people doing the work. Traits, skills, health, and intelligence ultimately determine how efficiently all of these systems translate into progress. However, those traits, or low intelligence for example, should not scare you away from assigning the pawn to researching. In RimWorld, not everything will be ideal. Sometimes you just play the hand you are dealt. And if I were to choose one advice that sped up researching the most for me, is brute forcing, placing 2 or 3 research benches in one lab and assigning top priority to research for the corresponding number of pawns. Okay, let's summarize this with a couple of concrete examples. These are not fixed build orders, just frames of reference. If you're starting as a Neolithic in a warm biome with long or year-round growing period, Devil's Strand becomes a very strong early investment. Sowing it early means it can start paying off while the rest of your colony is still stabilizing. From there, complex clothing and complex furniture make sense because they directly improve survivability and mood, using systems you already have access to at the Neolithic level. At that point, stone cutting and electricity become natural next steps. You can handle most early necessities with your Neolithic toolkit, so rushing high-tech production is often less important than strengthening what you already have. Now let's look at an industrial level colony in a cold biome where outdoor plant growing is unreliable or extremely limited. The obvious thought is hydroponics, but in practice the real bottleneck is power, not hydroponic basins. Sun lamps are a critical piece here, and they require a large stable power supply. You can actually delay hydroponics themselves because indoor soil farming is often enough early on. In this case, prioritizing batteries and reliable power sources usually matters more than rushing hydroponics. Geothermal power plant is excellent, but often out of reach early due to cost. Wood and chem fuel generators can be problematic in cold biomes where organic resources are scarce. That's why solar panels paired with wind turbines tend to be the most practical early solution. They complement each other well, and if placed correctly, solars don't block the wind flow. That's all I wanted to cover in this one. Thank you for watching and take care.